The plane wheels touched down on the tarmac at O'Hare International Airport. And my heart did a little flutter. Just like it used to, when I was a girl, going on a first date. But this wasn't a date. This was something far more important. "Arthur, wake up," I whispered, nudging my husband's arm. "We're in Chicago. We're in Elena's city." Arthur groaned, rubbing his stiff knee. "I'm awake, Margaret. I'm awake." We were 62 years old. Retired school teachers from a small, dusty town in Nebraska. Our lives were simple. Garden in the morning, news at night, church on Sundays. But we had one glorious, shining achievement that we polished and displayed to anyone who would listen. Our daughter, Dr. Elena Vance. Elena was a neurosurgeon. Just saying the word made my chest swell. For 8 years, she had been working at St. Jude's Memorial, one of the top hospitals in the country. We had the photos to prove it. Screenshots of our weekly video calls, where she sat in her blue scrubs, a stethoscope draped casually around her neck, looking tired but important. "I removed a glioblastoma today, Mom," she would say, rubbing her eyes. 12 hours in the OR. "But the patient is going to make it." Arthur and I would sit in our living room, breathless. Our little girl, who used to faint at the sight of a scraped knee, was now saving lives. She sent us money every month. $2,000, like clockwork, to help with Arthur's arthritis treatments and the house repairs. "Doctors make good money, Dad," she'd say, when we tried to refuse. "Please. It makes me happy to help." But lately, the calls had been getting shorter. She looked thinner. Her eyes, usually bright, seemed dull behind her glasses. And when Arthur's knee got worse, bone on bone, the local doctor said, we decided it was time. We didn't tell her we were coming. We wanted to surprise her. We thought she could pull a few strings. Maybe get Arthur seen by a specialist at her prestigious hospital. We took a cab straight from the airport to St. Jude's Memorial. The building was massive. A gleaming tower of glass and steel reaching into the gray Chicago sky. "Look at that," Arthur whispered, leaning on his cane. "She works in a palace, Margaret." We walked into the lobby. It smelled of antiseptic and expensive coffee. I adjusted my best floral blouse and walked up to the reception desk with the confidence of a mother whose daughter owns the place. "Good morning," I beamed at the young woman behind the desk. "We're looking for Dr. Elena Vance. We're her parents." The receptionist smiled politely and typed into her computer. "Vance. Vance. Is she in oncology? Pediatrics? Neurosurgery?" Arthur said proudly, straightening his back. "She's a surgeon." The typing stopped. The receptionist frowned. She typed again, faster this time. Then she picked up a phone, murmured something, and looked back at us with a confused expression. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. We don't have a Dr. Elena Vance in our directory. Are you sure she works at St. Jude's? I laughed, a little nervous titter. Of course. She's been here for 8 years. Maybe she's listed under a different department? She does. Brain things. Let me check the main registry. She typed for a long minute. Then she shook her head. Ma'am, I have records for every physician, resident, and intern. There is no Dr. Vance employed here. A cold prickle of fear started at the base of my neck. That's impossible. We talk to her every week. We see her in her scrubs. Maybe she's using a maiden name? The receptionist suggested gently. Vance is her maiden name, Arthur said, his voice tightening. She isn't married. I'll call the chief of staff's office, just to be sure. The receptionist said, sensing our rising panic. While she made the call, I stepped away from the desk. My hands trembling. Arthur, what if she transferred? What if she moved hospitals and forgot to tell us? She wouldn't forget that, Margaret, Arthur muttered. Looking around the lobby, as if the answer was written on the walls. My eyes wandered down the long, pristine hallway to the left of the reception desk. It was bustling with nurses in blue scrubs, doctors in white coats, and patients in wheelchairs. And then I saw the gray. Among the sea of blue and white, a figure in a dull, shapeless gray jumpsuit was pushing a heavy, yellow mop bucket. The figure was small, with hair pulled back in a messy bun. Head down, scrubbing a coffee stain on the linoleum. I blinked. The posture. The way the shoulders hunched. It looked so familiar. The figure turned to rinse the mop. For a split second, the profile caught the light. My heart stopped beating. Elena? I whispered. Arthur followed my gaze. What? Elena. I shouted, louder this time, ignoring the hush of the hospital. The woman in the gray jumpsuit froze. She stood, perfectly still, for a second, gripping the mop handle like a lifeline. Then, very slowly, she turned around. It was her. But there was no white coat. No stethoscope. No aura of authority. Her face was gaunt, stripped of makeup. Her eyes were rimmed with dark circles, darker than I had ever seen on video. And on her chest, embroidered on the cheap gray fabric, was a name tag. Elena. Environmental Services. She looked at us. Me in my floral blouse, Arthur leaning on his cane. And the color drained from her face until she looked like a ghost. Mom? She mouthed. I ran to her. I didn't care about the bucket or the wet floor. I grabbed her arms. They were thin, wiry muscle under the rough fabric. Elena, I stammered. What? What are you doing? Is this a joke? Are you undercover? It was a stupid question. I knew it the moment I said it. Elena looked at me and then at her father, who was limping toward us with a look of utter devastation, on his face. She started, her voice cracking. Spill in aisle 4. She dropped the mop. It clattered loudly, against the floor. And then, she burst into tears. Not polite, quiet tears. Great, heaving sobs, that shook her entire body. She collapsed, right there, in the hallway. Sinking to her knees, on the wet floor she had just cleaned. "I'm sorry," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry. We didn't get Arthur seen by a specialist. We didn't get a tour of the OR. Instead, we sat in a small, cramped studio apartment in the basement of a building 3 miles away. It smelled of mildew and instant noodles. There was a mattress on the floor, a single chair, and a stack of medical textbooks collecting dust in the corner. Elena sat on the mattress, still in her gray uniform, twisting a tissue in her hands. Arthur sat on the chair. I stood by the tiny window that looked out onto a brick wall. 7 years, Arthur said, his voice heavy. "You've been lying to us for 7 years?" "I didn't mean to start it," Elena whispered, looking at the floor. "I failed, Dad. I flunked out of med school in my 2nd year. Why didn't you tell us?" I asked, my heart aching for the girl huddled before me. "I couldn't," she looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "You were so proud. Every time I called, you'd tell me about how you bragged to the neighbors. My daughter, the surgeon. My daughter, the genius. I tried to study harder, but the anxiety, it ate me alive. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. When they dismissed me, I felt like I had died." "So you scrubbed floors?" "I had to stay close," she said, her voice trembling. "I got a job at the hospital as a janitor. Being near the doctors, smelling the hospital. It made me feel like I hadn't completely lost it. And then I started sending you the money." I froze. "The money?" "The 2,000 a month. I work double shifts," she said quietly. 6 days a week. Including overtime, I make about 3,000 a month, after taxes. I send you too. I live on the rest." I looked around the squalid apartment. The instant noodles. The lack of furniture. "You've been starving yourself," I whispered, horror washing over me. "You've been living in poverty to send us money we thought was a doctor's salary. I wanted you to have the life you deserved," she sobbed. "I wanted to take care of you, even if I wasn't a doctor. I wanted to be the daughter you thought I was." Arthur stood up. He walked over to the mattress and sat down next to her. He put his arm around her shaking shoulders. "Elena," he said softly. "We didn't love you because you were a doctor. We loved you because you were our daughter. But I failed you," she cried into his chest. "No," Arthur said firmly. "You lied to us. That hurts. But you didn't fail us. You sacrificed everything. Your own comfort, your own pride. To help us. That's not failure, Elena. That's a misguided, stubborn, beautiful kind of love. We brought her home, to Nebraska, 3 days later. The transition was hard. The town buzzed with rumors. Did you hear about Elena Vance? Came back from the big city. Burnout, they say. Elena stayed in her room for the first month. She was depressed, deeply ashamed. She wouldn't go to the grocery store. She wouldn't see old friends. But life has a way of moving on. And Arthur's knee wasn't getting any better. One morning, I found Elena in the living room. Arthur was grimacing as he tried to stand up from his chair. "Don't pull like that, Dad," Elena said. Her voice raspy from disuse. "You're straining the patellar tendon. Here, lean forward first. Use your core." She guided him up, her hands gentle but firm. She adjusted his stance. She massaged the muscle around the knee with a dexterity that surprised me. "Does that hurt?" she asked. "Less," Arthur admitted, looking surprised. "A lot less." Over the next few weeks, Elena took over Arthur's care. She researched physical therapy exercises. She built a ramp for the porch. She created a chart for his medications. I watched her, one afternoon, as she helped him with his resistance bands. She wasn't wearing a white coat. She was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. But her face, it was focused. Calm. Confident. "You know," I said, setting down my knitting. "You're good at this." Elena looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's just basic anatomy, Mom." "It's not anatomy," I said. "It's care. You listen to him. You watch how he moves. You have a healer's hands, Elena. You always did. Maybe surgery wasn't the right way to use them." She went quiet. She looked at her hands. Hands that had held a mop for 7 years. And now held her father's ankle. 6 months later, Elena walked into the kitchen with a pamphlet. "The community college in Lincoln," she said, looking nervous. "They have a physical therapist assistant program. It's 2 years. I think I could do it. I already know most of the science." Arthur lowered his newspaper. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I think that's a brilliant idea." It took 2 years. She graduated at the top of her class. We went to the ceremony. It wasn't a grand medical school graduation. It was in a gymnasium. But when they called her name, Elena Vance, Arthur cheered louder than anyone. She didn't open a big hospital. She opened a small clinic in a rented storefront on Main Street. Vance Rehabilitation. It's been 3 years since that day in Chicago. Elena is busy. The clinic is always full. She treats farmers with bad backs, high school athletes with torn ligaments. And yes, old teachers with bad knees. She doesn't make a surgeon's salary. She drives a used Honda. She lives in a modest apartment above the clinic. But last week, I stopped by to bring her lunch. I watched through the window as she worked with Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old woman recovering from a stroke. Elena was holding Mrs. Gable's hand, guiding her through a finger exercise. She was smiling. A real smile, bright and easy. She looked tired, but it was a good tired. The tired of work that matters. She isn't Dr. Vance. She never will be. But as I watched Mrs. Gable laugh at something Elena said, I realized something. My daughter isn't saving lives in an operating room. She's giving people their lives back. One step, one stretch, one movement at a time. And honestly, that makes me prouder than a white coat ever could.